started looking at this stuff and also reading Sally Anderson, who's also done the forum, I was sort of like, I noticed I was like really resistant. I'm like, but what about the heart? This is too harsh. But slowly I got it. I mean, I think this is fantastic. I love it. It's really exciting. I've just realizing that my word, through just how important the word is, I guess, in the sense of really being embodied, of being grounded or relaxed and seeing what's there, because if my word doesn't match somehow the experiencing and I can't verbalize this, then it means nothing. That's probably why we don't honor the word, because we haven't had that experience somehow. Does that make sense?
I also presented this to several spiritual teachers, right? In a way, when I run into them, I was trying. One, I was trying to get on the hangout, and the other one, I was just trying to expose myself and tell her what I'm doing, right? And so then we were talking about the collapse of the constructed self, or somehow underneath the constructed self, something that always exists, and that something is actually pretty secure. There's no risk to it, and so then my thoughts are that by doing this work and watching your words and watching your self-talk and whatever else, finding out about your level of integrity or your level of authenticity or even just what would it be like experimenting with trying to see what it's like to be authentic in situation by situation, I suppose. My premise is that that constructed self gets taken less seriously and in a way thins out, and that somehow I believe that there's whether it's a Rick Archer thing that you're more susceptible to an accident when your constructed self is thinner or not. I don't know. I mean, so then these spiritual teachers, in a way, I think they came back and said that no, it's actually worse because then it's more subtle, so you don't notice it, right? But it's still the same web that you've covered your essential self. You've covered it with a constructed self, even if that constructed self is very thin and very subtle. So then, I don't know. I don't believe them actually, But anyhow, what do you think of that?
Well, we learn, what happens is we learn to be a safe and comfortable human being instead of an effective human being. And, we're not willing to trade that off. We're not willing to give up our comfort and safety to be effective, because being effective in the world is risky business. You have to put your ass on the line.
Yeah, but is it either or on those two? Like you can't take comfort in your failures and you're almost getting theirs and actually your few little successes. Apparently, that's the constructed self. In other words, it always seeks the comfort, and the expanded self or the self that's there before. Until you're in touch with that, you're always at risk, and you're always uncomfortable. Is that it?
Yeah, I mean, the constructed self seeks comfort, but the whole point of the work that we're talking to people about is to recognize that most people don't know how to be an effective human being. They don't know that it's not necessary to play it safe all the time. They don't know that it's not exciting to be comfortable all the time. And so the things that are being taught in this course about leadership are exposing people to the way things actually work if you want to have an exciting life as a human being and if you want to create who you are. And the whole business of context, I have said often, and I think it's a critical area in this conversation, that context is decisive, that the context of one's life shifts when a person recognizes the reality of their identity and what their identity is up to, and how their identity is running their life in a way that leaves them dissatisfied, leaves them fearful, anxious, and depressed. And the shift in context that occurs is a shift in which one experiences the way things show up in life as whether or not they're useful and workable rather than whether they're safe and likable. And so you start seeing new possibilities. You start seeing different possibilities. Your perception changes. The world you see changes. You actually see a different world. You know who you are is no longer a construct that is hell bent on survival at the expense of everything else. In terms of looking good, for example, and avoiding looking bad, and all the other rackets that people run. But you begin to recognize that it's possible for you to intervene in what is occurring as far as the internal processes that are happening as thought patterns, habits, feeling states, filtered listening, all of these kinds of things, that you can intervene in that process. And one of the ways to do that, as you mentioned earlier, is to discover that to be inauthentic is not satisfying and is not workable and is not effective and is not powerful. And the pathway to authenticity is to be willing to start to acknowledge your inauthenticities. And the only way a person can acknowledge their inauthenticities is to recognize that who they are can take that risk, that it won't kill them, that it won't invalidate them, that it's okay to be an asshole. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to, to manifest the personal construct that's there as the process is going on, to disassemble it and replace it with a personality structure that's effective in living life.
I think, there's a great confusion here, because spiritualists talk about self with a small s and self with a capital S. And in a way, we're saying that until you see this no thing, right? And so then I'm using another term, the constructed self and the expanded self. And it's not really a self that expands. It's a self that's expanded from the construction, or it's already expanded, or maybe expand is the wrong thing, because that sounds much like a verb, like you're going to do it, like you're going to expand something. And but anyhow, I'll search for another word later. But in other words, we're saying until you're in touch with this expanded self, the constructed self is so at risk that you can't really make a lot of moves. But there's really nothing to do, or nothing can be done about the expanded self. It's just totally expanded with or without you, right? And so then it's not like, the spiritualists think, okay, I'm going to move over to the expanded self and I'm going to drop the constructed self. And actually the constructed self is a load of crap, Mm-hmm. And, but really, this whole course is talking about the constructed self, because you can't do anything with no thing. You only can do things with manifestation. And mm-hmm. So then we got to really make it clear that the constructed self it can be a bondage, but it's also a freedom. And we're talking about using the constructed self, but also having one foot, or somehow being centered in the expanded self, and knowing that we're not really at risk, but we're operating in a constructed self that's going to have failures, just like Adyashanti said, and it's going to make what's it called? It's a realm of possibility, right? You have to make a realm of possibility, and then, I don't know, talk about it, sign people up to it, convince people that this realm of possibility is a possibility worth pursuing. And I suppose it can be uncomfortable, right? And you can feel you're at risk there. Is that correct? I mean, we're not, because spiritualists think you're going to switch over and throw away the constructed self. We're not saying that at all.
No, we're saying that that's stupid. That's stupid, because
that's throwing out the baby with the bathwater, right? You got some dirty water there. We don't need that baby anymore. He gets dirty.
Well, that's throwing everything out, because the thing about it is, what you're talking about when you say the expanded self. Really, the expanded self there need not be anything done about that. That's already what's so. There's nothing to be done about that. It's already
You
there.
Can't do anything about it. There's really nothing you can do,
Right.
It's already, that's when people say it's all perfect, right?
Yeah. I think that there are ways that you can talk to people that kind of create some openings for people where they can have this direct, non-conceptual experience, even if it's only for a moment. I've had conversations with people, and I watch their face, and I see them see it. I see them see it, even if it's only for a moment. And when they see it, you can, once they see it, you can begin to talk to them about the fact, can you see that this non-conceptual experience is a direct experience of the actuality of the way things actually are, that everything exists as nothing. Everything exists as nothing before it's named. And we come into the world, and before we're able to have language, we're introduced to a reality in which the word is the thing. We're introduced to reality that way, that the word is the thing, that you learn your name and people talk to you like you're that name. So, and then it goes on from there, that we just keep learning more about the word is the thing. And so if people see that, and they can begin to recognize, they can begin to see the distinction between the word is the thing, and that nothing is there before it's given a name, and then see that that's the case about you too, it kind of creates an opening for them to have the direct experience of who they are in terms of non-conceptual as far as nothing is concerned. And they can also begin to realize that the vehicle through which this word is the thing happens constantly and automatically is the thought process. Everything shows up as thoughts, and thoughts are concepts, thoughts are words for things. And if they begin to see that, and then they begin to see that their own thought process is just a thought process. It's not a reality. It's a conversation about experience, a direct experience. See, the one thing about direct experience is that it's consistent. It's always the same. It's always nothing.
Firstly, I think, I've used a lot of the spiritual stuff as justified resignation. I can see how I use it to say, everything's all right just the way that it is. And I think that's one thing that really stands out for me in this course.
It really doesn't matter whether you understand. It really doesn't matter whether you can remember the points. What it matters is that you see what you see when you look for yourself at what's being spoken about. That's the only thing that matters. And you may not even remember it.
Well, I think, the greatest, honestly, this is, I've hardly done anything except read the notes in a few conversations, been in on a few conversations with you and Richard. And I feel like I've awakened, I'll say, in spiritual speak more than I have like in this past month, and what I have like in years. Been more real, particularly with the, be authentic about your inauthenticity, because I really, didn't realize how strong my need to be, to look a certain way was important to me, need to be what I think you're saying, to be adored. We have this need. So, the big cost, to hang on to this. And so it's been really hard for me to sort of expose that. And I guess, I've been doing a bit of that and just noticing a relaxation that comes with that. Well, saying, well, you know what, yeah, I am this, I do get jealous, and I do feel threatened about this, and I feel uncomfortable about expressing myself, and, just sort of declaring this to a couple of friends and with Richard, and, and it feels great.
Yeah, because what it does is it distinguishes the constructed you from the reality of you.
Yeah, and I can see really clearly it's not who I am, and somehow holding all that up there took so much energy. I couldn't feel what was beneath that, which is, a lot, I guess, one could point to it like a lot more freed attention, in the sense that, to sort of create things. I'm daring to have a dream now that I never dared to have before. And even sort of take action steps towards it, and, Yeah, I think, I think, I was saying to Richard, I think, like I said to you before, I think I'm a sort of like a typical, garden variety, spiritual speak person, and I think they're probably going to be the hardest, not to break. I said, the mainstream people seem to be a lot more open in the sense that they haven't created or everything's all right just as it is, and all that spiritual stuff that teachers give us, the form and the formless. I mean, just if you noticed in that conversation, we spent so much time um, trying to establish who we are before we could even get to the space of creation. Well, how are we going to use our word now from here? We're so much trying to prove that escape our human experience, that this being human is not important, that the important stuff lies beyond what's human. So let's just pass the time because we don't exist anyway. So you abdicate responsibility in that sense. And I think what we were doing in that talk a lot is trying to establish, yes, but we're not here, and we're just conditioned thoughts talking to conditioned thoughts. And even a lot of stuff that was being said is true. It's sort of like that's where the attention is. You're just living in, and that itself, and speaking about the spirituality, is very, what they would point to as mindy. It's very conceptual, all
Oh, yeah.
these
All conceptual.
yeah,
It's all
it's all conceptual, and I can see, me too. I sort of been telling myself, oh, I live in the heart space, and I'm very heartful, but really, most of the time I can see I've been very mindy about it, and not at all in what I've been pointing to as the heart space. So, because I guess the teachers say some things that resonate, and so I hang on to that conceptually, and then I'm not really living it, but I'm sort of speaking it from a conceptual point of view. I'm not experiencing it.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
The best bullshit is still bullshit.
There's a lot of money to be made from depression, I tell you. These guys, I mean, Jeff Foster, Bentinho, they were both like really depressed people, and so was Eckhart Tolle and Byron Katie. She was really always depressed. I mean, most of them, except for Adi Ashanti, who I think he was sort of one of the ones that wasn't really suffering any. I mean, he had some disappointment with his cycling and his accident and that sort of thing, but nothing kind of really major.
Instead of saying self with a small s, I would call it the constructive self. And what's it constructed out of? It's constructed out of thought patterns. And however they got there or not, but somehow pointing to an experience that says that would be like, I realize I'm no thing, and it's a direct experience, and explaining how that, that's a direct, non-conceptual experience of who I am, if that's the way John Sherman says it. Somehow, to many, many, many people, that feels like that's not here now, but I'll get there, right? And I wonder if you can mention it and say, that's something you'll probably find sometime. But this is just my belief in thinning out the constructed self and just finding out what works, what doesn't work. And what doesn't work is what binds, of course. And then just find out what binds. And these are self-limiting thoughts, or like self-talk, or the self-critic. And these are what blocks, what protects the self-critic is the always already listening, so that you don't let anything in that would expose the self-critic. And so then if you just start working with those things are here right now. And so the tendency, it seems to me, that the draw or the magnetism of those subjects brings you right into here, right? And then somehow you have to face up that you're not supposed to be a self-critic about the self-critic, right? You gotta look and say that this is a game, or let's make it a fun or a play or something. Somehow not make it worse by doing that. But I don't know. I mean, for me, the whole spiritual, I don't know what's a good word that just says everything. The whole spiritual ambient, the whole way it operates is by facing people to an experience that they don't believe they're having right now. And okay, good. They catch 2 people, they catch 5 people, they catch 15 people. You know, in other words, 0.001% of the people really get it. You know, and 95 don't get it at all. You know, and then a whole bunch of them say, "Yeah, I get it." Actually, a whole bunch of them say, "Oh, yeah, I get it," but they only get the conceptual part of it. They make the extension. In other words, they say, "I'm not a logical being," but they arrive there with logic. You know, because it's kind of like if you're saying things like, if you see something, if you see your emotions, you're not that emotion, because otherwise, how would you see it if you're it? And so they're just making this inference. You know, they're inferring, I'm not a logical being, but they're doing it by inference, by a logical structure. So then it's just bogus. It just doesn't work. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, I want to get away from that, and I just want to point to tools. Tools that you can see that you're not using and that you could use, and to try them out in a few little small situations. And Rena and I are trying them out with our relationship, and my God, it's the best relationship I've ever had or ever could even conceive of. I never could think that I never knew woman, you know, as anything but adversary. And yeah, there's a few loving moments and all that, but you know, they're really it's all business as usual, right? And it's trading love for behavior.
Well, I'm at this point. It's my what I see to be the case is that it's possible to have it's possible to have people have the experience of nothing. It's possible to have people have the non-conceptual experience, and the reason I say that, and I wouldn't shy away from it because I think it's critical. I think it is really the space in which the other conversation needs to take place. Otherwise, the other conversation is going to take place in a context that's still fearful, in a context that's still suspicious, in a context that's still doubtful, in a context in which a person isn't willing to take the risk of being open to hearing what you're trying to get them to see, like a possibility for their future. I've been around the forum for 30 years, and the thing that really is the most outstanding feature of it, as far as I can tell, is that it's just like the rest of the esoteric teachings and spiritual teachings, because people go through the forum and they get high, you know, and they think they have these powerful insights, and then they feel like they can live a different life. But 90% of the people, you talk to them a month later, they're right back in the shit. So they can't make use of it. And the reason they can't make use of it is because they haven't got the other piece of it that allows them to be willing to take the risks necessary to really put these things into use on a consistent basis, and to stay aware of the consequences when they don't do that, and know what, you know, the consequences are when they don't do that. So I think it's very important to have that conversation with people. And I think it's very important also to let people know that the kind of structure that that we have as an identity is hypnotic. And what I mean by that is that it's not going to go away just because you discover that that it's not useful. It's going to keep playing the same records because it's the neural pathways in your brain. You know, it's going to keep playing the same patterns. You're going to keep having the same thoughts. You're still going to be late.
In other words, by hypnotic, you mean like there's a feedback loop that supports itself and keeps rebuilding. Even if you knock it down, it rebuilds. It rebuilds because that feedback loop is where you got to kind of put your pickaxe.
Well, and, you rebuild it every time you pay attention to a thought that's not useful, because you give energy to that thought, and that deepens the groove in the neural pathway in your brain. So that's why attention is so important, because if you learn that when you recognize that a thought is a negative thought, that's a survival thought, that's not a useful thought, that's a reactive thought, as soon as you recognize it, you redirect your attention. You don't feed it energy. If you feed it energy, you're the feedback loop.
Now, what is that in the? I totally read you on there, and it's exactly what Rena and I are discovering even before this course. But I mean, we're not trying to say we're brilliant or bright, but I mean, we drew this course in, and we drew you in probably because of that, and we've been reading books after that and before that and stuff, and we're just kind of it's just awakening within us that exactly what you're saying is where you put your attention is actually a choice point. And but where does this show up in the course exactly? Is it really strong? Now, like I thought that reading that course, I've read it, and I thought, okay, I want to do these courses. Why? I want to present this material. Why? Because I want to be a teacher? Because I want to present the form? No. Because I know that just reading this thing once myself is not enough to make it stick, right? And so I want to be involved in a deeper way. But where exactly in the course does this really come on gangbusters? Because I've always thought, that the course, the leadership course, infers hugely that you are no thing and all that stuff. And it also infers, there's actually a part I remember that says that you can't build on residue, you can't, this is what our wording, Rena and I use this wording, we can't build our afternoon even on emotional or a thought pattern residue from like a trigger or from a reaction. So we have to clear the space. And I remember the part of in the leadership course where it says a real leader has to be a perfect listener or authentic listener somehow, and receive his coworkers' complaints and where they're at so they can build on that. But where else do these kind of things about you are no thing? I think it's in there lightly here and there, scattered around. And if you have a background like me and Rena and other people, you can maybe realize that. But it doesn't really come out gangbusters full force and say this is it, does it?
No, it doesn't. This is my own work. This is the work that I have been doing, and it's the work that you've been doing too, because you discover. Let me just shut that off. You discover if you start to use the material in the course in your life, and you start to pay attention. It's inherent to the material in the course that you must pay attention to use it, right? So by using the material, by being committed to using the material in the course in your life on the fly, you will naturally and automatically become more attentive. You will pay more attention to your interior experiences and your thought patterns and so forth. And when you pay attention to them, you will recognize for yourself, as you did, that when you pay attention to them, they will capture you. They will capture your attention, they will cause your behavior, and they will continue to create suffering in your life. Now, that's not specifically spoken that way in the course. The course is designed to be palatable to people as something that will allow you to be an effective leader. But it is part of the experience that one has when they practice the material in the course. And I have found that it's useful to actually, everybody's phone's going off.
Yeah, sorry, that was my phone. I'll call you back, darling.
I have found that it's very useful to make these distinctions with people. Because we're not actually delivering the course the way the course was designed and intended to deliver, the way Werner and his team is doing it. We're talking about points of material from the course that when you look at them as they are related to some of the ways that people have approached attempting to have their life work, whether we're talking about satisfaction, quality, one of the things that people, for example, fail to recognize is that one of the critical things that makes a difference in the quality of your life in terms of what people call happiness or in terms of what people call satisfaction is how effective you are in living your life. I mean, if you're effective in living your life and you have a relationship, as the two of you have been reporting, that you discover that if you use certain material on how relationships do work, and you apply that to your relationship, and therefore your relationship works, you're happier, you're more satisfied, you're less stressed, you have more energy to do other things with, and so forth.
Well, you're more centered, and you also you have less thoughts because you don't need them because things are working, right? Because thoughts are usually supposed to be problem solvers. They're supposed to kind of take us out of the mud. And if you're not in the mud, you don't need all those thoughts. And so then, to me, I'm saying then your constructed self is thinner, and you're more accident prone to see who you really are. And spiritual teachers have told me, you know, maybe not, maybe just in passing, because we didn't really go in to ask that. You know, I was just sharing what I'm up to, and they said, well, that doesn't make any difference. You know, it's still there on a subtle level. It recreates on a subtle level. And so then the constructed self just becomes thinner, is what they're saying. But anyhow, I mean, if you're having a happy, productive, effective life that's also contributing to those around you, I don't see how you couldn't really be considered that that's what life is all about. You know, I don't know. And because what are these teachers saying? You're not going to get there. You're not going to get anywhere by doing that. Well, I say, look, I don't want to be getting anywhere because I'm already here, and that's what I want to try to do, is get here.
I say it doesn't make any goddamn difference to experience who you actually are. It doesn't make any difference. It creates problems, in fact. It doesn't make any difference. It doesn't need you to experience it. It's already the case. So that's not where the action is. The action is in life. The things that people complain about, the things that are dissatisfying, the things that are uncomfortable and create suffering, are what's going on in life that they're dealing with. As far as who they are is concerned, that doesn't need to be dealt with at all.
Yeah. So anyhow, what I like maintain is that this one part about you can't really construct something new on a residue, right? And like an emotional grudge, for instance. You can have I just saw a movie last night about Pot Paul and somebody, a Westerner, a New Zealander's brother got murdered, executed by the Khmer Rouge, and now there's just a year ago that they brought some of these people that ran Pot Paul's regime to trial, and this guy for 30 years has been stewing on this. But anyhow, you can't build on that kind of a residue, and so then I totally believe that you have to kind of see this no thing play. The whole point of the spiritual teaching kind of pushes you to this platform of no thing and like the spaciousness, and actually get this experience. But then they don't do anything with it, because like that's the perfect playground where you can construct something, right? And so then I call all those teachings truncated teachings, because they bring you right to the place where you're going to start to have fun, and then they'd say, oh, don't have any fun, by the way, because that's just mind, right? But the constructed self is part of is a human. You know, we live through agreements, kept and broken agreements, and that's called society, and that's where this game is played, and it can be totally constructed on no thing. And once you get to no thing, now it's time to do it. You know, go for it now. And that's my message, is kind of, let's all go for it.
In regards to what you're pointing to, like teachers take you to that space and then they don't create from there. I think the reason being, and I'll speak from my experience, and I don't know how it is for everyone else, is sure, I would be taken to that space, but the reason I don't create from that space is because I wasn't aware that I use this space as what we talk about, an abdication of responsibility. Okay, because when I get to this spaciousness, I don't have to take responsibility. So in a sense, you know, how can one create when they are in that spaciousness? But I think, you know, people who are really looking, who consciously know that they are looking for tools, are going to love this and really like grab it really quickly and latch onto it. But a few others who are probably like myself, who are, say, abdicating responsibility, are going to choose to stay in that spaciousness.
But at least it causes those people to consider that they're abdicating responsibility. And then they say, well, maybe I ought to just try to create a little thing, you know. Well, then we got them, you know.
Well, there's only one reason that I can see that there's any value in experiencing that nothing matters, which is what the spiritual quest is, you know, to get to that place where, you know, everything is okay, nothing matters, everything's perfect. There's only one reason that I could see that there's any value in getting to the place that nothing matters, and that is to be able to then come back to have everything matter. And then you have a game to play. Otherwise, what's the point of having nothing matter? What, you know, what are you going to do? Just go sit in a cave?
Yes. Yeah.
So then what you said, okay, that this is not the course, because why would we even do it? We're not going to be Werner Erhard, and we're not going to be, we don't have the medium, and we don't have the full resolve of the people. They didn't pay $1,600 or $3,000 to come to our little course, so they're not really going to be that kind of resolve. So then what you said is, this isn't the course, this is something that is like how I want to use this material. It's offered to us free, and we can acknowledge it. But right away, in the very beginning of what we're doing, we need to acknowledge it. This is not the landmark, and it's not a landmark anyhow. But it's not a course made by these three or four gentlemen, or is there one lady in there? I forget. But anyhow, but this is something else that uses their material and shows how valuable their material is. But somehow we see it slightly different. Is that it?
Well, I think the thing that we're doing here is having a conversation about what works and what makes a difference in people's lives, really, and kind of defrocking the spiritual pretense and the spiritual idea. And the basis of that is to say what John said. I think one of the thing that drew me to John in the very beginning was he was the only person I ever heard say that in the last 5,000 years, everything that's been done, everything that's been taught, all the traditions, all the gurus, all the practices haven't really made much of a difference. That only a very small percentage of people have gotten the experience that the gurus claim to have gotten. And even if then from there, the next thing is, and even if you have gotten that experience, what have you got? What are you going to do? Like declare that you're a guru, and and put flowers next to you in a vase, and put a picture of
create a new job.
Yeah, right. You're right. You get
Yeah,
out
that's
there.
all they've ever done with it. What are you going to do with it? And those are kind of things that are outside the realm of, you can't say what you're doing because you're not the doer. You can't say what you want because those are thoughts. You can't say who you are because you're nobody. So then the way they got to that space was by denial instead of affirmation, somehow affirming human value and their humanness. They had to deny that. So then once they get there, then all that's left is no possibilities, right? And so
Yeah.
I've said that from day one. I've said that there's no traction in this stuff. And I wasn't allowed to say any of that stuff because people would just poo-poo me and say, you're in their mind. That's just a thought,
After looking at yourself, you can be actively involved in the reconstruction of a personality that's effective. And that's the kind of work that we're talking about doing.
Absolutely. That's what Rena and I are. We're discovering the wheel, apparently, because we're discovering that basically from so many bits and pieces that we're picking up here and there that we can't really identify that, John said that, and so now we're applying it. It's just been little bits and pieces that kind of like summed up to say, hey, there is a choice point, and we can find out, there is a play. We're starting to hear it from other teachers too that have said it 4 or 5 years ago, and all of a sudden it sinks in what they mean. Oh yeah, that's what they're saying. And I guess we don't see it until we realize it in ourselves, and that we're seeing that we don't have to go with what comes up.
Well, I think that that's true. But the thing that I have also seen to be the case with a lot of teachers is that they don't know themselves what they mean. I've heard many teachers mention "look at yourself," including Ramada, but they stepped over it in terms of recognizing that it was the direct action that one could take that would create a shift in the way that one experiences their own personality, and that they begin to pay attention to the relationship between their personality, the thoughts they have, and the behaviors that come from all of that, and the results that they get in their life. See, one of the problems with spiritual teachings is there's a lot of things that you can get or understand in your head as a concept, but they don't exist anywhere in life for you to see them and discover them for yourself. The kind of material that we're talking about here are things that you may not get the first time you hear because they don't fit anything that you're aware of from the past, because they're not from the past. These are creative ideas. These are ideas that are distinctions. They're ideas that language possibilities, not things that have already happened. And so you have to be willing to just get what's said and then take it into life and be clear about what was said and then find it there for yourself, discover it there for yourself, put it into use for yourself and see if it works. An example of what I'm talking about is that one of the things that they just added to the course is a new distinction. It's not really new in Werner's work, but it's new to the Course on Leadership, where he says that responsibility is a willingness to consider yourself cause in the matter, a willingness to see yourself as the source of even things that you see that appear to have nothing to do with you, to be willing to see yourself as cause in the matter. That's a completely irrational thing to do. And for a lot of people, they can't get it. They say, well, what are you talking about? Is that responsibility? Responsibility means if I'm responsible for something, doesn't that mean that it's my fault if I'm responsible for something? And one of the things that he said about that to clarify the statement is that I'm not talking about the traditional form of responsibility. I'm redefining the word for use in this material. I'm not talking about responsibility in the sense that it involves blame or fault or judgment and evaluation. I'm talking about responsibility as a point of view that you can take, that you can choose to take as a way to see things so that you can recognize what possible actions you could take that you couldn't see before. That's the only purpose of it. So the point there is that it doesn't matter whether you understand it, whether you like it, whether you agree with it, whether it fits your past experience. Just get the idea that to take the point of view that you're the source or your cause in the matter of your life, your cause in the matter of everything that comes into your experience is a powerful thing to do. And if you put that into action and use that in your life, you'll discover the power that it has, because you'll see possible actions that you could take that you wouldn't have seen otherwise.
Yeah. Well, for those that live in a concept about, a concept is always removed from this moment. So then responsibility, when you look at the past, it means who did what and why, and, who should be blamed, right? But responsibility as a living entity in the present is only an opportunity. What can I be responsible for? It means like, what can I create? So then that's just about presence and about standing on no thing.
And really, ultimately, it really doesn't matter if you get all the questions answered, because that's just cookies for the mind. I mean, the bottom line is you want people to just be clear on what you're talking about, and be clear they don't have to understand it. Be clear that what they need to do is to take it out into their lives and put it into use, and then notice what happens. Conversations for possibility. That kind of generally addresses what we're talking about, and it gives us the leeway to just have gives us a leeway to just have a conversation, and the beginning of the conversation, the orientation to the conversation, is simply to say that there's this course that we will provide a link to that includes all the material for the course, includes all the slides used in the course, just exactly as the course is presented. It gives an introduction to the course and the nature of the course, and the fact that its intention is different than typical courses are about leadership. The reason we're interested in having a conversation for possibility about leadership is because one's ability to lead one's life is just as much, if not more, and maybe the actual source of fulfillment versus what has often been presented as the case. And by virtue of the nature of any conversation, there's freedom in it to go in different directions and to emphasize certain points. And our intention is to present certain key ideas from this leadership course that if people take these ideas and put them into action in their life, they'll discover the power that's behind this material and go to the download of the course and make use of it for themselves to whatever extent they choose to. But our purpose is to make people aware of the course, to talk about some of the key aspects of the course, and the power and value of some of these key aspects of the Course. And invariably, that's going to end up being related to how that relates to spiritual teachings and what people attempt to get out of spiritual teachings.